Hi everyone, Janie here. Welcome back to my garden and welcome back to Water Week. This week on my channel, we are focusing on all things watering in the garden. On Monday, I went over everything that I learned for water management in my Master Gardener's training course. It was one of the most interesting training courses that I had during my Master Gardener's training. I think because I live in California and we are a drought state, and watering my garden is so important to me. Watering my lawn is so important to me. Conserving water is so important to me. It's just a really big part of my gardening journey. So I felt like it was extremely interesting, and I wanted to dedicate a whole week to basically water management, how to water your lawn, tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff. So in my video yesterday, I will link it up above, I talked all about lawn sprinklers and lawn watering, and that was really interesting for me as well, because at least here in California, we have restrictions on our watering for our lawn watering. So it was pretty interesting to see how you can still have a lush green lawn and get around those restrictions that we know we're going to have this year. So today I want to focus all on drip irrigation. And drip irrigation was a very intimidating subject for me as a new gardener. I knew what it was. I knew that it got water through some tubing to my plants, but to set it up or to understand it, it was kind of this big, intimidating thing for me. So over the years, I've gotten a lot more comfortable with it, but it is one of the questions that I get asked the most, or I should say one of the topics that I get asked about the most in the comment section and in my email. So hopefully this video will help answer some of those questions that you guys have. Okay, let's get right into it. Let's consider the source of your drip irrigation, where the water is going to be coming from. You basically have two options. One, you have a manifold, which a lot of people already have set up in their homes. I talked about this yesterday during my lawn sprinkler watering video, but basically your manifold is a collection of remote control valves that are controlled. They're turned on and off by your controller or your timer. My controller is a Ratio smart water sprinkler system that I absolutely love. I will link it down below, but a lot of people have kind of the push button timers, and even when I was growing up, we actually had one that you manually turned on and manually turned off. Second option for a source could be from a faucet. You can actually fix converters to your faucet to change just a regular water faucet to your drip irrigation system. These work okay. I've had one of these before. I've connected a timer to it. One thing I do have to say is if you're going to set one of these faucet connectors up, you want to make sure, and I can't emphasize this enough, you want to make sure you have a backflow preventer. A lot of the converters and the timers for these faucet conversion kits do not include a backflow preventer. And this is incredibly important because if it rains a lot or, there's excess water, there's a chance that the water can come back up through your drip irrigation, and if you don't have a backflow preventer, it can actually get into your home, into the pipes in your home, and you really don't want that. I didn't have the best of luck with my faucet conversion kit because mine actually kept leaking. Even when I used the Teflon tape, it still kept leaking and I couldn't get it to stop. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try it. If this is your only option and you don't have a manifold, absolutely try it. I'm sure you can get it to work. I had mine on a faucet and that faucet still leaks. So I think it was the faucet's issue and not the conversion kit's issue. Now, going back to the manifold is how my drip system is set up, and I'm willing to bet a lot of you have the same system in your homes. Each one of these things on the manifolds are different valves, and they control different zones or hydrozones. And basically the zones run at different times because we don't have enough water pressure coming into our home and coming into our garden to be able to water your entire garden at the same time. So it's broken up into zones, and those zones zones you can control separately. Like one zone you can run for 10 minutes, another zone you can run for 15 minutes. The other thing you can do with zones is one zone you can hook it up to your sprinkler system, and another zone you can hook it up to your drip irrigation. Now, another question that I get all the time is actually how to convert your sprinklers to drip irrigation. I will talk more about this later in this video, but one thing I do want to say is if you are going to convert your sprinklers to your drip irrigation, you want to make sure you convert all of one zone to drip irrigation and all of another zone to your sprinklers. You don't want to mix and match on the same zones because you'll end up having quite a lot of issues with the timing of watering and how much water is coming out and on and on and on. It just gets to be a mess. So if you are going to convert one of your zones, make sure each zone is dedicated to either your drip or your sprinklers. Okay, let's talk now about how you're going to transport the water from the source to your garden. And you're going to do this by some type of tubing or piping. And there are a couple different kinds of tubing or piping. One of them is called PVC piping, which is that white piping that you see. You often see it. Plumbers will use this. They will actually use this for drip irrigation. This stuff is great because it's really not going to break down. The drawback from it, though, is that it is not adjustable. It is incredibly hard to take the PVC tubing and change the direction you want to go, or to take another branch off of it or something like that. So PVC tubing is great, but it's usually to take water from one place to another. It's not usually to take it straight to your plants. The type of tubing that is most commonly used is usually 1/2-inch tubing, or sometimes people will use 3/8 inch tubing. This is the bigger size tubing, and this will take water from your source, from your manifold or your faucet, to your plants. Finally, after the big guys like the PVC or the 1/2-inch tubing, you have 1/4-inch tubing, otherwise known as spaghetti tubing. And this stuff is smaller, it is so much easier to work with, and it's just going to allow you to further direct the water to exactly where you want it to go, right to that root ball. Now, one thing that I learned about spaghetti tubing in my Master Gardener's class is that you don't want to overuse this stuff. Spaghetti tubing or 1/4-inch tubing, you really only want it to run about 18 inches to 2 feet at max in one span. So if you came and you looked at my garden right now and my drip irrigation system, I haven't followed that rule. I knew that you couldn't run it that far because the longer the tubing is of the 1/4-inch tubing, the less pressure there's going to be in that tiny tube, and the water's not going to get through as much, especially the longer the tube. So you want to limit your 1/4-inch tubing to 2 feet max. I totally get that, but I don't think that I'm going to go through and I'm going to replace all my drip tubing at this point, just because that will take me absolutely forever. But I do think that you have to know the rules to break it. All right, I want to stop right here and give you all a little bit of a tip that I think is extremely important, and that is the importance of brand loyalty in drip irrigation. Now, I know that sounds kind of funny because a lot of times brand loyalty doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what type of brand of something you're using. But when it comes to drip irrigation, the type of tubing you choose and then the type of emitters that you choose, brand loyalty really matters. And that's because when you go with a brand and you choose, say, the 1/2-inch tubing or the 1/4-inch tubing, and then you go and you buy the emitter, that emitter is going to fit into that tubing absolutely perfectly. That coupler or connector is going to fit into that same brand's tubing perfectly. Once you start switching brands though and mixing up the brands, one emitter might be 1 millimeter off from this other tubing that you bought from a different brand. So that can actually lead to leaks and failures in your system. This is another lesson that I learned the hard way. I ended up getting quite a lot of leaks when I was using a certain brand of emitters, and I didn't understand why that brand wasn't working for me. The reason is because I bought such a different brand of tubing, and it just didn't work together. So that's one thing I have to say is when I start talking to you all about these different pieces of equipment for your drip irrigation, make sure you stick with the same brand. You will be happy that you did. All right, let's move on to emitters. Emitters are little things that you put into your drip tubing, which allows the water to come out of the tubing and to water your plant. You can purchase drip emitters that are pressure regulating and non-pressure regulating. And all that means is when there's a varying amount of pressure in your system, a varying amount of water pressure, these pressure regulating emitters are going to maintain the same pressure of whatever it's rated at. So if it's 1 gallon per hour, 1 gallon per hour pressure regulating emitters is going to emit 1 gallon per hour. You can also purchase non-pressure regulating emitters. They're actually cheaper, but if you have varying amounts of pressure, then, if your pressure drops, they are not going to emit 1 gallon per hour. Or if your pressure increases, say you're on a hill, those emitters are going to emit more than 1 gallon per hour. So I always like to purchase the pressure regulating emitters. I kind of just stick with that and don't even think about it. Pressure regulating emitters were actually developed for farmers who were watering their crops along long rows, and they ended up having quite varying amounts of pressure. And so having those pressure regulating emitters ensured that each crop was getting the same amount of water. So it's really important for a farmer. I think it's really important for us as gardeners because you want to know exactly how much water is getting to each plant. You can purchase emitters in different sizes. Like I said, different rates. You can get them in 0.5 gallon per hour, 1 gallon per hour, 2 gallon per hour. Those are the 3 main sizes that you can purchase. You can purchase other sizes, they're just kind of harder to find. You can also purchase something called emitter tubing. You can get these either in the 1/2 inch size or the spaghetti tubing, the 1/4 inch size. And what this is this is tubing that actually already has the emitters built into the tubing at certain intervals. I actually love this stuff because my garden is pretty densely packed, so having emitter tubing makes my life very easy and I don't have to put in as many emitters. Again, emitter tubing was developed for farmers that were growing in rows. They're growing their crops in rows. So my cut flower garden, I love using emitter tubing because I can purchase the emitter tubing that is located, the emitters are located 12 inches apart, and then I just plant one plant here and then I plant one plant at the next emitter, and I know I have good plant spacing and I know I'm going to have emitters to each plant. To connect 2 pieces of your drip tubing together, or to branch off of a certain point, or to kind of tee off, you are going to use something called a coupler or a connector. Now, these guys come in the same sizes as the tubing. You can see everything's pretty consistent here. Comes in 1/2 inch sizes, 3/8 inch sizes, or 1/4 inch sizes. Again, I'm going to say it again, make sure you purchase the same brand because again, the size of the coupler needs to match the size of the drip tubing. And so you're going to ensure that you're not going to have leaks, or you're going to minimize your leaks if you get it from the same brand. I'll also talk about 1/2 inch end closures, or sometimes they're called figure 8 pieces. This is how you stop the end of your 1/2 inch tubing. What you're basically going to do is you basically take your 1/2 inch tubing, you fold it in half, and then you slide on this figure 8 coupler or this 1/2 inch end tubing. And that's how you basically pinch off that tubing at the end. To decide how you're going to lay out your drip tubing in your garden bed, what you want to do is you want to think about where your source is, where your tubing is going to start, and then where you can lay out your 1/2 inch tubing or your 3/8 inch tubing. I'm just going to say 1/2 inch from now on because I think that that's the most common for homeowners. You're going to lay out your 1/2 inch tubing to get as close to all your plants as you can. Again, you want to limit the amount of spaghetti tubing or 1/4 inch strip tubing you have, so the closer you can get that 1/2 inch tubing to all your plants, the better. Now, again, my garden does not follow this. It does not follow this rule. I have laid out my 1/2 inch drip tubing, and then I've done pretty long lines of 1/4 inch drip tubing. I will change it eventually, but for now, that's where it is. So if that's the best you can do, if you can't get your 1/2 inch tubing, within 2 feet of all your plants, don't worry about it. It's just, these are guidelines. These are the right way to do it, but I don't do it the right way, and my garden is totally fine. line. So I just wanted to say that. Don't feel bad if you can't lay it out absolutely perfectly. One thing I will say about drip tubing and connecting the different pieces together and making your puzzle is it can be so difficult to connect the pieces together. It's difficult to connect the couplers into the drip tubing. It's difficult to get the emitters into the drip. It's difficult to connect the emitters into the 1/4 inch drip. When I've been doing my drip for a couple hours, my hands are red, raw, and painful just because you're pushing so many things in. There are tools that you can get to help out with this situation. You can purchase tools to help you, pop in an emitter or poke a little hole in the 1/2 inch tubing to be able to get the emitter in or the coupler in a little bit more easy. The tools aren't perfect though. Like, I have some really great tools that definitely make it easier. It's still tough for me and I'm pretty strong, right? So one of the tips that I've heard throughout my gardening seasons is to use like a lighter, or actually to use a cup of boiling water to loosen up the ends of the tubing to make it easier to slip over a coupler or slip over the emitter. Now, don't shoot the messenger, but the presenter at my Master Gardener's training course actually said this isn't recommended. She said it's not recommended because when you heat up that tubing, you're actually breaking down the structure and you're putting that tubing at more risk for leakage, which is what you don't want. So what she said, never done this before, again, I'm just the messenger. What she said is to actually use a little bit of liquid soap. So she has a little bit of liquid soap, she gets a little bit on her finger and she runs it on the inside of the tubing or around the emitter or the coupler, whatever she's connecting, and that lubricates it enough to be able to get it in without messing up the integrity of that tubing. Now, obviously you don't want to use too much soap because then you're going to have bubbles coming out all over your garden. And again, I haven't tried this, but I did want to tell you all that tip. All right, now when deciding where to put the emitters, once you have your spaghetti tubing or your 1/4 inch tubing, where are you gonna put the emitters next to your plant? Well, the thing you have to think of is you want to water the roots of the plant, not the trunk or the base of the plant. So you want to water around what's called the drip line. So if you have a plant, say you can look at my camellia right there, I don't wanna put the emitter right next to the trunk of the plant. I wanna put it out where the edge of the leaves are because I know that that's where the roots are. So you want to put it as far enough away from the plant as to where the branches or the leaves come out. As the plant grows up, you're gonna have to move the emitter. A very small plant is gonna have a small drip line and a small root system, so that emitter is gonna have to be closer to the plant. Then as it grows up and gets bigger and bigger, you're gonna have to move that emitter out. If you decide to do a loop of emitters, some people will do a circle of emitter tubing around their plants, which is a great idea, but you are gonna have to go in and you are gonna have to widen that circle as that plant grows, because you wanna make sure that you're not watering the trunk of the plant. One, the plant won't get any water because all the water is going right to the trunk of the plant and not to the roots. And two, it can actually cause rotting and molding and too much moisture if you're watering right on the base of the plant. So remember that when you're deciding where to put your emitters. So one of the questions that I get so often whenever I talk about drip irrigation, anytime I have a video about drip irrigation, I ultimately get this question, and that is how to convert your sprinklers to drip irrigation. And I want to preface my answer to this question by saying, one, I've never actually had to do this in my own garden. I never actually have had practical experience with converting sprinklers over to drip, but I know that you can do it and I know that it's pretty easy. And then two, the other thing I'll say, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, when you want to convert your sprinklers to drip, you want to make sure you convert the entire hydro zone or the entire zone. So if you have sprinklers and they run at the same time by your controller, you need to convert all of those sprinklers over to drip, or you need to cap off some of the the sprinklers and convert a couple of them to drip. You cannot have sprinklers and drip running at the same time because there's different water pressures, different timing. It just kind of messes everything up. But if you do have a zone of sprinklers and you want to convert that whole zone over to your drip irrigation or a drip irrigation, you absolutely can do that. And it's actually pretty easy. So I'm going to say it again, brand loyalty. There are actually retrofit kits that you can get for your sprinkler system that are a piece of cake to install. At least it looks like it's a piece of cake. I was watching some of these YouTube videos on how to do it. I will link a couple of them down below so that you guys can see. But basically what you do is you unscrew the whole sprinkler, you replace that sprinkler with this retrofit kit, and then you just connect your drip tubing and you're done. I think the hardest part is making sure that you either convert every single sprinkler on that zone that you have or capping off all the other sprinklers. Again, you want to use the same brand as the rest of your system because you want to make sure that retrofit kit fits the sprinklers properly, all that kind of stuff. So I like to use Rainbird sprinklers and drip irrigation. So I would actually go to Home Depot that sells Rainbird and I would buy a sprinkler retrofit kit, and then that's what I would install into my sprinklers and then take my drip irrigation off of that. So it seems pretty easy. I would say absolutely go for it if you guys want to try it. Again, just make sure you're doing it properly. Make sure you're capping off all the other sprinklers in that zone and not combining the two. All right, let's take a little bit of a break and let's go on a field trip. I actually want to take you all to the store so you can see where you can purchase these components. When I first started out doing drip irrigation, I was a little intimidated to go to the store and to figure out, where I was looking for my couplers and where I was looking for my drip tubing. So I wanted to take you all so that you could see actually how easy it is to purchase them from the store. Now, again, I'm going to say brand loyalty. You want to make sure that you're sticking with the same brand. And I cannot get through one gardening day without running out of something, some type of component, and needing to run to the store. So my advice for you is to go to the absolute closest big box store or garden center that you have near your house, because ultimately you're gonna need to go to the garden center or to the big box store sometime during a gardening day. So take my advice and go to the closest one. The closest one for me is actually Home Depot. Home Depot sells Rainbird, which is why I use the Rainbird components. But if Lowe's is closest to you, or if a garden center that sells drip irrigation is closest to you, then go with that one and go with those components. All right, we're here at Home Depot, and I had to park over at the garden center side so I could take a quick walk through and see what's there. Oh, look at how beautiful. It feels like spring. Okay, have to focus. You want to head over to the plumbing section. That's where you're going to find all the irrigation components. Mine is located at the end of the plumbing aisle. You can see they are all together. And this is the main section where I'm usually in. All right, I had to do a voiceover here because Home Depot was playing the music way too loud and I didn't want to get a copyright violation. So here on the ground right here is usually where I find my 1/2-inch drip tubing. And you can see they come in big bundles like this. You can see right there it says 1/2-inch drip, and this is 50 feet long. And this is nowhere near enough for me. I usually go for these big bundles right there. Then if you look over, you can see the brown ones, and the brown ones, at least for this brand Rainbird, they are usually the emitter tubing, and this one has emitters every 18 inches. So it'll say on there 18 inches. This is 100-foot long. It is 0.7 gallons per hour, and each emitter is 18 inches apart. Here's the 1/4-inch emitter tubing. This has 1 gallon per hour emitters every 12 inches apart, and this is just the regular drip irrigation tubing with no emitters in. With that one, you're going to use these emitters right here. Here's the pressure compensating emitters I was talking about. The blue ones for Rainbird are 1/2 gallon per hour, and you can see right there, you want to check in these bags to make sure that one, when the bags aren't open, because unfortunately people do open the bags and steal them. So I have bought bags that have been opened, but you want to make sure it's the right color. So right there on the box, it was black. It's supposed to be 1 gallon per hour, but unfortunately in the box they were stuffed with the 2 gallon per hour emitters. So I had to dig around to find the 1 gallon per hour emitters right there. See, black and black. Then you can see here is the 2 gallon per hour emitters. These are the non-pressure compensating emitters. There is a place for them. You can connect them up to the spaghetti tubing, kind of like it shows in that picture, and it will act like the regular emitter tubing, but I just don't like using those. Here you can see the barbed tees, the barbed elbows, basically the couplers or connectors. This is for the 1/4 inch tubing. Those are usually black, and they're going to come in these bags as well. Again, check the bags to make sure the bags haven't been opened, because they definitely get open sometimes. You can see one right there. And then a little bit further on, I'll show you guys, they have the brown ones, which are for the 1/2 inch tubing. There you go, right there. So yeah, you can see it's kind of a big jumbled mess when you're trying to find all these components, but all the components are there. You can find them. There's the barbed tees. That's for if you want to branch off. And that purple tool just right off to the right, that's one of those tools I was talking about that can help you get those couplers in the tubing. Here's where I wanted to show you all the backflow preventer. This is what you want to put when you're connecting your drip up to your faucet. You want to make sure when you get this universal adapter, you have a backflow preventer. They will sell timers just like this one. I've actually purchased this one and used it before, and this does not come with a backflow preventer. So you need to make sure you purchase one. You will regret it if you don't purchase one of those. Unfortunately, they don't really tell you that. They should make it clear, or they should sell it with the kit, but they don't always. They tend to sell them separately. Then I wanted to show you right here, if you wanted to connect your 1/2 inch tubing and connect it down to make it 1/4 inch tubing, you can use an adapter like that, or you can just use one of those couplers. That would work just as well. Then I wanted to point out something called a goof plug. A goof plug is how you end a 1/4 inch tubing to kind of stop up the end, or if you make a mistake, or if you change your configuration with the 1/2 inch tubing, you would just poke one of these in the hole. You want to make sure that it fits. They do have versions of these that are 2-sided. They'll have the small barb on one side and a bigger barb on the other side. Rainbird doesn't actually sell those. I don't think they do. They only have this one side, but I wanted you guys to be aware of those, because I will actually use these goof plugs quite a lot. Finally, you can see over here in the blue, they have things called micro sprays or micro sprayers. And that's basically where you can connect a sprayer to your irrigation tubing. This is not what you want to use, because you will deal with evaporation and mold and mildew on your plants. You want to avoid the micro sprays if you can. Here you can see at the end cap, I found quite a lot more. So I just had to go around the corner, and then I would have found a lot more supplies. And this right here is the expansion kit, the repair and expansion kit. I love this thing. If you guys are just starting out, see if you can find a kit like this, because it comes with all the things you need. You're gonna run out of them, but it's a good starter kit to get used to drip irrigation and how you're going to manage it, and to make sure that you get all the things. Okay, we are getting some sun. All right, let's talk a little bit about maintenance for your drip irrigation. It's a bummer, but drip irrigation is not a one and done job. You cannot just install it and then never think about it again. You have to actually go out and you have to check it. You have to check your drip irrigation and watch for leaks and make sure there's no clogs. You know, you have to take care of this stuff, just like you take care of your plants. So the most important thing for maintenance is to check for leaks. And the best way to do this is that you come out into your garden when it's nice and quiet. I like doing it early in the morning, turning on your drip irrigation and walking around your garden and listen. What you're listening for is you're listening for leaks. The easiest way to find a leak in your drip irrigation is to listen for it. You're probably not going to see it and see the water until it's a really, really bad leak, and you need to check it. You need to get to it before that point. So by listening for it when it's quiet, you can actually hear kind of like a spraying sound, or kind of like a like a squirting sound, I guess is how I would describe it. And then you know you most likely have a leak there. So you can go in there and you can check it a little bit further. Jason will do this too. When the drip irrigation is on, he'll kind of just walk around and he'll listen to hear if we have any type of leaks. This does happen. I don't want to say frequently, but it does happen throughout the gardening season. So it's something that you guys need to do. The recommendation is once a month to walk around and check for leaks. Next, you actually want to remove the figure 8 end pieces or the 1/2 inch end closures from the end of your 1/2 inch drip tubing and actually run your drip system so water can flow through and whatever dirt and debris has gotten into that 1/2 inch tubing can run out of it. I've actually never done this before, but I'm planning to do it this week. I'll bring you guys along with me, but it is a good practice and the recommendation is to do this once per year. Finally, the third item of maintenance you need to do for your drip irrigation is you actually need to clean out the filters in your manifold. There are filters on those manifolds and you actually can just unscrew them, clean them out with a soft toothbrush and put them back. They actually will fill up with dirt and debris, so it's really important that you clean them out once a year as well. Again, I will get to this later on this week when we do our maintenance day. All right, we are almost done with drip irrigation day. I just have a couple more tips I want to give to you all just as kind of reminders for your drip irrigation. First off, I want to remind you all about the 1/4 inch drip tubing length. This is more a reminder for myself because this is not what I have in my own garden, but from now on, whenever I install more drip tubing, I'm going to follow this tip, and that is not to have my spaghetti tubing or my 1/4 inch tubing go further than 2 feet. 18 inches to 2 feet is the maximum length you should go at any point. Tip number 2 is protecting your drip tubing from the elements, mainly the sun. So drip tubing will wear out if it lays in the sun for too long, especially if you live in hot environments like I do. So what you want to do is you actually want to bury your drip tubing. You actually want to put it under your layer of mulch, and your layer of mulch should be about 2 inches. So you want to put it right above your soil, underneath your mulch, keep it hidden from the sun, and that should allow it to last a lot longer. Tip number 3 is to use landscape staples or drip irrigation stakes. They're called a lot of different things, but basically they're metal stakes or metal U-shaped things that hold your drip irrigation in place. It will keep it where it needs to be. Specifically, it will keep it underneath the mulch and away from the hot sun. I find myself always running out of these staples or stakes, and I can never buy enough. And if you buy these at the big box store, if you buy these at Home Depot, you get a pack of like 6 of them, or maybe 10 of them if you're lucky, and they're expensive there. I found that if you get them from Amazon, you can actually get a bulk box of them. They are so much cheaper. They're not ideal because the drip stakes that you get from the big box store are actually U-shaped, and the ones that I get in bulk are actually like a square shape on the end. So they're not perfect, but they work fine for me, and they're so much cheaper, and then I don't run out and I don't have to keep going to the store to get more stakes and more stakes and more stakes. So my tip is to get these stakes in bulk from Amazon, save a couple dollars, and then you won't run out of them. All right, that is it for today's video on drip irrigation. I hope it was helpful for you all. Again, I know this is so much information that I'm throwing at you at one time. I totally get it. Same as yesterday's video with the lawn sprinklers. That was a ton of information even for me. What I'm planning to do is I'm planning to put all these videos on water management into my water management playlist. I'll link it above right now, so you guys can go back and you can access these videos in the future. If you have questions, if you're planning to install a drip system, come back and watch these videos. I also have a couple videos from last season where I installed drip irrigation in my oak tree garden bed, so that might help you a little bit as well. So check that video out. It's in the playlist, and I'll link it right here as well. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Again, I hope it was helpful, and I hope you all have a chance to get into your garden today.